And welcome back. Another walk, another episode, and another batch of movies that I've been spending my time watching. Thought I'd do things a little bit differently and go out to the park in the evening tonight. Most likely get carried away by giant mosquitoes in the process, because there is a bog in this park and they do get bad. But as for tonight's films, I'm actually skipping over a weekend of things I watched. I may come back to them later, because I want to talk about this most recent weekend first, because I watched one of the biggest, well actually the biggest horror movie release that has happened so far this year, which was Obsession. Comically successful movie. I think it's made like over 400 times what it made. Naturally inspiring Hollywood to just do the next big batch of, hey, how much cheap stuff can we get out to hopefully make money, and wanting to hunt down YouTubers for directors. Which, yeah, so there we go. If only I'd gotten into the YouTube gig earlier, maybe I would have developed into something. Oh well. But I will admit, I was a little bit worried coming in to watch this movie, because, and this is a point we're going to come back to a few times over future episodes. For about, it's been, I'd say, over 15 years, not quite 20. There's kind of been a tendency where almost every year there'll be one, sometimes more, but usually just one horror movie that comes out that just gets universal love out of nowhere. Declared an immediate, instant new classic, and then you watch it and it's just a glaring piece of shit. They happen. And I was worried, because like I said, every year there's at least one. And so I thought, okay, Obsession could be the one, maybe Backrooms is the one, who knows. I actually think I know which one it is going to be this year, but like I said, we'll come back to it. Because thankfully, Obsession ended up being a decent movie. I would not say it's an all-timer, however. Just decent. And that's kind of going to be the thing I'm going to get into, is that, well, I think, it is a very entertaining movie. It's a very solid movie. But it comes up short in one really important area that I don't think many people have paid attention to. And that kind of comes down to the characters and the point of the story, which then results in kind of a lackluster and obnoxious final section. So, for anyone who hasn't heard of the movie, it has a very relatable premise, and that's kind of its strong suit. Yep, they redid some of the trails through here. But the premise is, young guy named Bear is just like over the moon for one of his coworkers. He's obsessed with her. He wants to tell her he loves her, doesn't know how, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, it's a very relatable premise. I think almost anyone, man or woman, at some point in life has had someone like that. Definitely lots of men have. I've had that, where there's that person and you don't know, how do you tell them? Should you even tell them? All that sort of, classic conundrum. But where the movie takes it is kind of like the monkey's paw thing, to the extent that even the director admitted he came up with kind of the monkey's paw aspect after seeing the monkey's paw version of Simpsons Treehouse of Terror. Which, I mean, it's pretty bad, like when your inspiration is a copy of a copy, but we'll come back to that. Like I said, I mean, these are young guys. He's like 20, so I guess I can forgive him a little bit on that. Like I said, it's a very relatable story. So, Bear, he's in love with his coworker, and he, at first he kind of thinks he's got like unlimited time to hopefully tell her his feelings. But then he finds out she's quitting the job that they work at together. He's afraid they're not going to see each other. And one day he goes to a new age store to buy her a necklace. Can't find what he's looking for, and instead buys a novelty called a one-wish willow, which he's given weird warnings about from the store owner, which we'll come back to the store later as well. And so they go out, do some stuff, and he takes her home that night, and he has the opportunity to tell her how he feels. She actually asks him directly, Which, if we were all so lucky in life in this situation that the person we are interested asks open and directly, hey, do you like me? But Bear doesn't answer truthfully. And then he uses the one wish willow to wish that Nikki, the girl, would love him more than anyone else. And things then naturally spiral out of control. Because she becomes obsessed about him in a way that is, damaging to her and those around them. And that's just how it spirals out. And like I said, the movie is actually very entertaining. The key thing that makes it work is the performance of the main girl that plays Nikki. Her name, I think it's Indy something. I can't remember her exact name. Yeah, but she does a phenomenal job in it. So the way she overacts some parts, the way she underacts other parts, shifts between stuff. Yeah, she is what makes the movie functional. And this is the sort of thing too. I always hesitate with movies that kind of hinge on that one thing that makes them work. It's sort of like the line from Iron Man and one Spider-Man movie. If you need the suit to be, if you need the suit to be somebody, then you're, well, if you're nothing without the suit, then you don't need it. You don't deserve it. And so I always kind of feel that way with movies. Like, if this only functions because of her, is it actually a good movie? But I still give it, the pass, because like I said, entertaining time, there's some quotable lines, and she's fantastic in it. As we kind of watched it, though, something kept bugging me. And this is why, like I said, I think it's a decent movie, but not a new classic. And I kind of trace it back to some problems at the very start of the film. It's sort of a split thing. There's character development issues and kind of place and time reality issues that sort of play together. So early on in the movie, we meet Bear and we see him, he is super obsessed with this girl. Like, he's crying to himself at night in his bedroom because he just wants her to be a part of his life that badly. And especially in this day and age, we actually have considered a loneliness pandemic in this country, especially for men. So you've got a lot of stuff that this movie could hit on, as far as deeper themes and all that. But kind of an odd issue is that we don't know why he's this obsessed with this girl. And you may think that sounds silly, but consider the situation. So in the film, he works with 3 other people at a local music supply store. So it's him, Nikki, and their 2 friends. I can't remember the names, but it's another guy and another girl. So they all work together. They go out to the bar, do trivia night, hang out with each other. We even learn that the other girl in the group has a crush on Bear. So it's not like he's lacking for romantic options elsewhere. But what's even weirder is you don't know anything about him, really. He lives in a seemingly, I wouldn't say an apartment, I'd almost say more like it's a duplex. And he shoots out a casual explanation that it's his grandmother's, and that thus he got to keep it. So he lives alone. You don't know anything about parents, siblings, exes, anything. There is no background to him. Just the immediacy of this is a guy who has a job, his own place, his own car, and is obsessed with this girl almost as if she's the only thing in his life, even though he has other friends and other girls who are interested in him. Who even, in one of the better scenes in the movie, he has good chemistry with. And this ties into the fact that the movie does, try to kind of paint him selfishly and kind of villainously as it goes on. But once again, you don't have that background on him. You have no idea what his deal is, why exactly he's this obsessed with her. And so usually what you do is you have the, you have some of the classic filmmaking things, show off how good she is, make her the kind of girl that anybody would fall for, But you also don't know a lot about her. And so her early scenes where it's, before all the wish stuff happens and things go weird, she kind of comes across a little bit like an asshole. Just a little bit. And the only kind of cheap thing they do to make you think of how good a person she is she takes some money, and she takes $20 and gives it to a homeless person. Which is a nice thing to do, except it's not her money. She takes it from the other girl in the group. So she's charitable with other people's money. So she's not really this like angel of a character either. And you also learn nothing about her seemingly. She seems to have her own house. Like, she doesn't live with family. She doesn't live with roommates. Nobody comes looking for her when she starts spending all of her time at his house. She does have a dad that she's estranged from. That's all you know. And so this is another person where it's like, okay, they're seemingly in their early to maybe mid-20s. They already have their own home and transportation and all this sort of stuff. It's weird. Like these are not 21-year-old, 22-year-olds that work at a local business. So like I said, there's a detachment from reality and a lack of character development. And then when you do get occasional bits of character development, you eventually learn something about a relationship between Nikki and the other guy in the friend group that paints them even worse. And so what bits you do know about the characters, they don't seem like great people. But you can get away with in a movie, especially a horror movie, if they're interesting. But like I said, it kind of piles up, because by the end you have all of this spiraling emotion and all these problems stemming from Bear's selfish act to make her love him, whether she wants to or not. And yeah, but all the characters in it, let's put it this way. When she initially changes after he makes the wish, the movie flirts with the idea that maybe she's having some sort of mental break. Perhaps she's on drugs. She claims that her dad is sick, something like that, or that she's upset. So there may be some sort of emotional issue, mental break. She could just be crazy. It may not be supernatural. But if you've watched your fair share of horror movies, I mean, you can go back to the old Polanski apartment trilogy, Repulsion, and Rosemary's Baby, and The Tenant. And they all played with that idea of, is what's going on psychological or supernatural? And each one has a different answer for it too. And this one only, like I said, it only flirts with it, and it can really only flirt with it. I mean, it could have played with it a lot more because of the fact that you don't know much about Nikki. But it takes them very little time to actually just kind of admit that, like, no, he made this wish, it went bad, and now everything's screwed. And so, like I said, I think this is what really damns the movie from kind of reaching its full potential. Because as you watch it, there's good scenes, she does an excellent job. But yeah, you don't have that deeper emotional hook. And what that ends up causing is that the last section of the movie, instead of kind of feeling really claustrophobic or tightening or really all that thrilling, just kind of comes across as more loud, gross, and crass. Because all you've been watching is just these underdeveloped, seemingly not good people making each other miserable. Granted, using supernatural means to do it. But yeah. And so I've already filmed this episode before because I didn't hit on enough points the first time I tried this. I'm kind of souring on the movie now more than I was when I watched it. And it does make me feel bad, because like I said, it is good. I mean, coming from where it came from, this YouTuber using less than $1 million to make it, getting some really good performances out of people. It's neat. I do take some issues with some of his stylistic choices, though, because for one, the movie largely is not scary. Most of the stuff that she does, I say it's more funny to entertaining to meme-worthy than it is actually scary. And I really hate that the movie falls into this old. It's kind of a bad trope. It's been going for a while now, where you have these younger directors who decide they want their movies to look like older horror movies, even if it doesn't make sense. So in this case, Bear's apartment. Okay, so he has it because of his grandma. So it has, hideous wallpaper, wood paneling, ugly rugs, and a tube TV with antenna that somehow still works. Like, by the end of the movie, Nikki has somehow recorded something of them and is playing it through their tube TV. Which, I'm not gonna... I guess I shouldn't be the old person yelling at, the kids don't know how the tube TVs work, but yeah, you don't, film a video with your cell phone and hook it up to the tube TV. It doesn't work. Those things haven't even picked up channels for a while. They're still useful, and neat little trivia for anyone who ever plays around with them. Most tube TVs, even after being unplugged for decades, still keep enough electricity stored up inside of them to kill a person. So, neat thing to know, if you ever decide to fiddle around with them. But yeah, that kind of combined with their unrealistic lifestyles of like I said, they're somewhere in their early 20s. They're all driving, they're all drinking, but the one girl's trying to get into college, stuff like that. But they all seem to have their own places, their own cars. These people are doing better than some full-on 40 and 50-year-old adults that I meet. I'm considered I've worked at hotels. Yeah, we get 50-year-old people who they surf from hotel to hotel because life has just kicked them in the ass. But yeah, then we're watching early 20-somethings who already have all this crap nailed down and have stable friend groups. Yeah, but they have crippling emotional problems and we don't know the source of them. And so yeah, I end up taking a lot of issue with it. But at the same time, I get, I'm not going to dumb down or try to demean how successful it was and what it's kind of meant for the audience, because for a younger audience, I always appreciate something that gets, especially a younger audience, into horror stuff, because I'm kind of a big believer, if you love something, you want to evangelize it. Yeah, so I don't want to tear the movie down, because, hey, if it's getting more people into it, cool. I just hope that kind of over the next few years, more of the people that's gotten into horror might kind of realize that, okay, it's not that great. They like it, they have an attachment to it because of when they saw it and kind of the hubbub of when it came out. But yeah, it's not ever gonna make my my list of essentials. Just no. But with that being said, it is a good movie. It is an alright movie. It's a decent time, pending you don't kind of mind the fact that by the end it veers more into just misery than it does actual horror. Which something about as I've gotten older, I appreciated that more in the 2000s when I was in my 20s, the early 2000s. Nowadays it's just what, I'm a little worn out by it. At the misery porn, trauma porn kind of stuff. It can be done well, but sometimes I just kind of prefer a good old monster chasing people through the woods, which, how fitting for where I currently am. So difficult one, decent flick. If you really want to check it out, you're at least not really going to be let down. You are going to have an entertaining time. But yeah, if you're expecting that this is the new, gold standard, pull back a little bit on your expectations. So, that being said though, after that was over, I decided to move on. I wasn't really sure what to watch. And so I busted out a disc that I've owned for, I think, over a year by this point. It's been sitting in my viewing pile. And I've known about the movie for decades. It's called The Attic Expeditions. And so it's very much of that early 2000s indie horror scene, which produced a lot of really good stuff. And I remember hearing decent things about the movie when it was new. After that kind of got forgotten. And then more people who have seen it kind of say that's not very good. But I finally turned it on, and so I think you go back into it. So So the movie was made, I think, in 2000 or 2001. The director has mostly made, actually I think directors have mostly made trash from that era. I recognize some of the covers, but most of the stuff I hadn't seen. I think it was like one other movie I had seen of theirs that was not good. But for whatever reason with this one, they were really able to attract a lot of talented people to it. The main actor, I cannot remember his name. He was in one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. He was mostly in late 80s, early 90s stuff. And he's kind of a sore spot for the movie because it's sort of this, mind screw movie. You're not really supposed to know what's real and what's not. And he's not really a strong enough actor to pull that off. Which is a shame. But surrounding him, though, is this really good cast of people. You've got Jeffrey Combs from, Reanimator and The Frighteners and all that sort of stuff. Ted Raimi, which, if you've seen the Evil Dead movies, if you've seen the OG Spider-Man movies, he's always great. Seth Green is in there, and he's actually, probably the highlight of the movie. He does a really good job in it. Wendy, I never know if her name is Robbie or Robbie. But she's, from Twin Peaks, People Under the Stairs. So yeah, you've got really, really talented people up there, and they really do a good job in their scenes. So they're kind of doing a lot to lift up the main guy who's just not quite nailing it. And I don't even know if it's necessarily his problem or just the way they directed him to be. But the concept of the movie, though, like I said, it's very much like a mind screw movie. So the guy is kind of experiencing multiple things at once. There's him in flashbacks to him, him with his wife, and they were apparently into occult stuff and magic. There's him getting brain surgery. There's him being admitted into a mental facility run by Jeffrey Combs, and then the main husk of it is Jeffrey Combs putting him into a group home. I think it's called the House of Love. And him spending time with the oddballs there in the attic expeditions as he goes up into the attic that has this big box that, has mysteries in it. And so, so they're bouncing around. A lot of the story is told out of sequence. And so, yeah, by and large, scare factor is almost non-existent. It is not even attempting to be a scary movie. And writing is not the best either. So, kind of the unreliable narrator stuff was really big in that kind of early 2000s indie horror stuff. You had things like Session 9 and Donnie Darko, but those are much better films than this. And so it's not one that I would really recommend to anyone unless the enjoyment that I got out of it was, like I said, the surrounding cast is doing an excellent job. And so watching them is fun. And there's a little fun to be had in the fact that it does kind of become a small Lovecraftian horror movie, because the magic stuff that him and his wife were into has to do with the book and the old ones and some of that, which makes Jeffrey Combs fit in all the better as well. And so those elements, those made it kind of entertaining. And as somebody whose main thrust getting into the horror scene was during that era, it feels kind of nostalgic. It feels kind of like a comfy blanket. But it's not anything really worth seeing unless you're somebody who needs that jolt. If you want to be like, yeah, I want to go back and remember these kind of movies. Because one of the best things the movie has going for it is very much unlike Obsession, which I find this interesting. Obsession was made on it was made in real places. They went to real homes and stuff like that, but it still looks like stages most of the time. It looks like sets. Save for a few locations like the music store, most of them look staged. But with the attic expeditions, you can tell, no, they're on this street, they're in this house. It looks real, it feels more tangible. And that was another aspect of movies from that time. And so that does make it kind of comfortable to dive back in. But still, nothing special. Oh, and I did forget too in the cast, there's even a brief one scene appearance from Alice Cooper. That's fairly funny. Said I don't know how the directors managed to get this many people, this much talent involved to pop in. But they did. They made for an interesting film. So that was the second one of the evening. And so, yeah, I was really kind of in a weird space that night because, like, you know, you watch this new thing that everybody loves that's decent, but not amazing. And then this old novelty act that really wasn't anything too special. So I went for a walk that night. You know, kind of clear my head and figure out, like, what on earth do I want to watch next? And yeah, I had no idea. So when I got back home, I went to, like, my main shelf where I keep, like, the stuff that is, you know, I think is vital, or the stuff that I just really, really like. Anything, like, bad, like, okay, something like the Yak Expeditions, that's in the closet in the Calyx Cube somewhere, or a storage bag, or what have you. But I went to the main shelf. I'm like, I need something that reminds me why I watch this stuff all the time. And so I dug out one that I'd only watched once before. Oh, wait one moment. Yeah. Yeah, I dug out one that I'd watched only once before from 1987 called The Kindred. And don't be thinking of Kindred the Embraced. It's not the sexy vampire movie. So The Kindred was kind of your classic, lower budget 80s creature feature. I do not remember the director's names on this one either. I have seen some of their other work. A few years earlier they had done The Dorm That Dripped Blood, and they had also done The Power, which I could not tell you the plotline of The Power. I just remember finding it very entertaining, but not in the way they intended. So, in this one's case, though, they set up this movie where a scientist learns from his dying mother, well, at least his sickly mother, that he may have a brother named Anthony, who's back at her lab out in the country, and that he needs to destroy Anthony. He needs to deal with Anthony. And so he gathers up his lab assistants and friends and heads out to this nice country home to see if he can find Anthony. And this movie also has a kind of surprising cast. It's mostly, you know, just low budget people, you know, who you might have seen in TV shows or something. But there are a few standouts. Rod Steiger is an evil scientist. Kim Hunter, I think is her name. She was Zira in the Planet of the Apes movies. She is the mom. And probably my favorite addition is Amanda Pays from Leviathan and the old Flash TV series. She's in there. And I always liked her when I was a kid. I think she was kind of part of what inspired my fascination for spindly British women. But it's one of those movies where I would also declare to most people, it is not traditionally good. But that being said, it was what I needed in the moment. Because it reminds me very much of, like, what I enjoy in horror, which is kind of like campfire tales, you know. You have this collection of kind of broadly drawn characters. They go out to a unique location, you know, this cliffside beach house ranch, and then they deal with a ridiculous threat. In this case, Anthony is a tentacled mutant baby because the mom had been experimenting with human hybridization of, like, sea creatures and humans. And so, as you can imagine, there's lots of tentacles, there's lots of slime, and there's a surprisingly thin body count, actually, for how slimy the movie is. But it's remarkably just entertaining for those, you know, those moments when you want to watch a horror movie that reminds you of, like, old nights watching Monster Vision or USA Up All Night, which some of us, sadly, are too young to remember, but for those of us that do, it's like, yeah, this is why I got into this stuff. And so it's the sort of movie where I would dare, you know, almost give it that essential list nod, but I know it would only be for myself. It would be completely selfish. Because for most people, it's like, yeah, it's not a great movie. It would be the kind of movie, though, that you'd remember if you went and rented it from a Blockbuster or a local joint, you know, and watched it with a big old bag of Doritos and just had fun. Because that's what it was meant for. It's almost... In fact, that might be actually the kind of the effect. It's almost like adult Goosebumps. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's quick, it's efficient, it's silly. But it is still, you know, it's attempting to be scary. It's gross, it's, you know, it's different. It doesn't try to punch above its weight and tackle societal issues, which I'm not saying that, you know, I dislike. Most of the best horror movies do tackle some sort of societal issue or mental issue or what have you. But it's nice sometimes when, like, yeah, when a mutant baby is just a mutant baby. That's all it needs to be. And yeah, it kind of makes for a delightful watch. And so I'd say then, of the 3 movies from this past weekend, that would actually be probably my biggest recommendation, which, as silly as it sounds, it's not like I don't recommend Obsession. It's a fun movie too, but for just somebody who wants just a nice horror story, you know, I'd rather go with ridiculous characters and slimy monsters. Some nights that's all you want. And that's just kind of the way it works. But, yeah, so to be fair though, I am pleased with the fact, yes, I nearly fell to my death there. I am pleased with the fact that, like, that Obsession is decent. Hopefully this is leading to more people getting into horror. Because a big part of, like I said, what I'm doing with this series is evangelizing. I've watched more horror movies. I own more horror movies than some rental stores ever even carried. And so you may not always agree with me, but I can kind of give you some guidance on, like, hey, I've seen this, it has that. I've seen that, it has that. You know, I want to spread that around more. And that was why I always got kind of bogged down, like I said, the movies that get praised as instant classics when they're not even particularly good. Because those end up becoming a problem. If you introduce people to, like, yeah, this is why horror is so great, and it's just something that's not even particularly good, yeah, that's where you get issues. Because then, what's that person going to think? That horror just isn't their jam, or just that it's not a good genre? You know, it'd be like if you tried to get somebody into action movies, and all you ever gave them was Seagal movies. You know, they're not going to have the best viewpoint of it. So that is tonight's walk. I hope you enjoyed the dark and spooky park. Although it's actually not that dark. Just, I think I turned down the ISO a little bit too much to counteract my nighttime settings. But I'm glad you joined me, and I will see you at the very least next week.